Sorry, thank you, Phil. I'm delighted to be here. I read in person in Phil's series, and it was just a wonderful experience. So when I knew this book was coming out, I mentioned it to him. And of course, there's advantages to Zoom readings, but we miss the in-person readings too. I'm especially pleased that two very important people are present at the Zoom tonight, besides my husband, Tom, to whom the book is dedicated. One of them is Patty Seaburn, whom I met in New York City before she moved to California. And then when I followed her out here, we reconnected. And I'm a big fan of her poetry. It's nice to see you. And the other person is Carol Davis, who saw this work as it was being written. So I couldn't be more grateful to her. She's my poetry partner in Los Angeles. So obviously there isn't going to be a lot of laughter in this reading. I apologize in advance. To fill those of you in who don't know, I lived in New York City on 9/11 in an apartment a block from the World Trade Center. I was there that morning and I fled. 12 hours later, after a very circuitous escape route, I was reunited with my husband, who thought I had died for a number of hours. But we survived. We moved to California. We've built a new life. But I always felt that the particularities of everyone's story deserve to be told. And I wrote this book in order to preserve that. As time has gone by, it went from being a first-person witness account to a larger contemplation of the world as it was, what we went through, what we experienced in the ongoing aftermath, and then what life is like 20 years later, a continent away. So there's 5 sections. I'm going to read a few poems from each section to give you a flavor of the whole book. So the first section is titled Hudson River School, Cloud Studies Hudson River School. And I realized that you can't write about loss without writing about what you've lost. And this section is about that. I picked the poems that I did because if you live in Ventura, you live close to water and it's a huge part of your life. If you lived in Manhattan, on the edge of the downtown Manhattan, you lived on the Hudson River. So here are 2 of those poems. Each boat signs the water, homage to the French poet Guillaume Apollinaire. Each boat signs the water with its wake, the way a thumbprint matches no other, or whales when they dive leave a signature, a calm so specific, biologists can tell which individual swims below their boat before the whale surfaces to breathe. I've watched the river 2 years now. By now I know the names of tugs, the ebb and flow of tankers and barges, when the next bright yellow banana boat comes in. I've caught at dawn an ocean liner cruise into port. Or that same afternoon, festooned with pennants and passengers on every deck, depart for parts unknown. Today a string of perfect petite swells, angling for shore, crest, then curl into whitecaps, but never break. A surfer's dream. Saltwater pearls strung on a freshwater stream. Even if I hurry down to the river, The boat that left this wake will be too far away to tell, although the waves it made still lap the wall before they ricochet the other way. And the last poem, thanks, in this section is the poem that Phil included with the Zoom invite. So I thought I'd read that one. It's all of these poems are homages, and this one is to the California artist Ed Ruscha. And the date of this poem is September 6th, 2001. So 5 days before 9/11. The Scissor Gate. The night was mild, clear, beyond right field. Manhattan nestled on the horizon like coals. Though the Staten Island Yankees lost badly to the Jamestown Jammers, we didn't mind. There was still the ferry ride home. Beyond the Scissor Gate pulled across the prow, the skyscrapers beckoned like a ribbon of stars that grew as we approached, dark bands of sky and water shrinking as the tiny buildings grew ever taller until they loomed above us, suddenly solid but shot through with white light. The ethereal become all too real, scaffolding on another world. By the time the ferry eased into its berth, we longed to put our feet on solid earth. So the next section is a long prose poem sequence in sections. It's called September 12th, so it's the title poem of the book. I'm going to read just the very beginning of it to give you a taste of what happens. September 12th, Tuesday morning, September 11. I'm reading the paper. The phone rings. My sister in North Carolina. Are you okay? Sure. Pause. Why? On Good Morning America, I just saw a plane fly into the World Trade Center. Didn't you hear anything? I walk to the far end of the living room and raise the sash and stick my head out to see the top. The North Tower is that close. Dark rivers of smoke pour through windows licked by flames. A thick gray tornado snout rises from the roof. That tower will fall. I couldn't be more sure. I have to flee. I run back, slam down the phone in dirty clothes, no bra or belt, lock up, get as far as the elevator, run back to grab my almost dead cell phone. Leave for the second time. 9:03 a.m., 9/11 begins for me. Don't worry, Angel says. Everything will be okay. It's a doorman's job to reassure. But I know he is wrong. How could two such tall buildings on fire not come down? For now, standing outside the building lobby in the courtyard, I can see both towers, can see thick black smoke, orange and red flames, can hear explosions, the steel groaning as it softens and sways, the crackle glass makes shattering. A man hurls an office chair repeatedly against a window on a high floor. At another, glass already gone. Two women perch side by side on the narrow sill, hold hands, pause a moment. jump. A few months after 9/11, I learned that the small suburban town in New Jersey, where I grew up, lost 11 people that morning. It was a small town. You would have known all of them if you lived there. And so that town is the focus of and those 11 people are the focus of the middle section of the book, which is called The Rock in the Glen. I'm going to read two of the portraits of people who died that morning. All of the specific information is culled from the New York Times, the Bergen Record, obituary notices, and memorial pages. So I'll read two. The first one, they're all named with the person's first name or nickname. Joe. He is holding his namesake fourth in a line. Joey, they will call him to distinguish him from his dad. It is clear he is brand new to fatherhood. You can see pride, wonder, and terror as he cradles the newborn in his arms. You are the sunshine of my life, he sang to his wife's growing belly. September 1, 2001. Thank God someone thought to take this picture. In the obituary, he is holding his only son, Joseph Holland IV. Paul. In this photograph, he is flying a kite at the beach. Too far away for us to see his big grin. You can read joie de vivre in his whole body. Confident, feet apart, he straddles sand and sky like a god on earth. This is his wife's favorite picture, the one she will leave propped up against his name on the town's memorial with a poem she wrote and a rose come the 6th anniversary of that day. I feel like I know those people. The aftermath section, which follows that, is called To the Dust, and it has an epigraph by Charles Bukowski, which many of you probably know. It's the one that was printed on a billboard of clouds. And the quote is, "What matters most is how well you walk through the fire." So the first poem in this section is called The Kiss. Your story. I didn't know anything was happening until I walked into the meeting. The TV was on, both towers were on fire. Not a minute later, the South Tower collapsed. Knowing you were home, waiting for the rug guys, that moment, I was certain you were dead. How could anyone a block away survive? I turned to Andy and said, "My wife is dead." Then I started to worry it was worse. You were hurt, trapped in pain, and I wouldn't be able to help. I hoped then you were dead. That would be better. I don't know what I did after that. I tried your cell. couldn't get through. Andy took me back to his house. We sat together watching the TV, waiting for news, not knowing what had happened to you. I was glad I had gone back to kiss you a second time before leaving. Do you remember that? So, of course, the human loss that day was the worst. But if you've lived through a disaster, whether natural or man-made, you know there are other kinds of losses. You can lose everything you own. You can lose your home. You can lose your neighborhood. You can lose a way of life. As a country, you can lose your way. But this poem deals with another kind of loss. It's dedicated to Cesar Pelli, the architect of the World Financial Center, which sat at the base of the World Trade Center to the west of it. And this poem is dated September 15th, 2001, 4 days after I fled, the first day that we went back. Not to stay, but went back. It's called The Winter Garden. 16 perfectly matched native California fan palms grew up in the Coachella Valley, took a train to Miami, wintered over, were trucked up to New Jersey, loaded onto barges, and ferried across the Hudson. Today, a few raggedy fronds poke above the debris, buried up to their necks in ash and shattered glass. The saga of the decade they struggled to survive under motorized screens and floodlights on timers, wiped out in seconds when the North Tower fell. Beloved curved barrel of glass, delicate fretwork supporting its transparent skin, mosaic of marble from Carrara, and a dozen other quarries in Italy, all crushed. And the palms, too, the ruined palms. So I want to read a concrete poem now. I'm going to hold it up just so you can see what it looks like on the page. 2 skinny little columns. You'll understand why. It's called Pinstriped Bullies. Some of us hated you. So tall, too skinny to be true. You swayed in wind, paired pendulums, making us seasick. Alternating vertical stripes, white, black, hurt your eyes marble. Dark glass echoed whatever weather was moving through. We gazed up, necks aching, until you collapsed in a cloud that rivered the blue before falling into the ocean. To live in your shadow was to feel infinitesimal. I've changed my mind. I want to read this next poem. After the disaster, fragments. I just want to say before I start that for over 6 months after 9/11, I couldn't write at all. And the first poems that I wrote were the following spring. But throughout the time that I wasn't writing, I was scribbling words on scraps of paper, words and phrases, and somehow those little pieces amid all the other chaos survived. They didn't get lost. And when I looked at them, I realized, well, this is the poem which is made from those fragments. After the disaster, fragments. We are not starving. We are wearing shoes on our feet. We have friends to care for us, a roof, albeit borrowed, over our heads. We are husbands, wives, still, lovers, parents, children. But the dust of thousands has settled over our living rooms. An early snowfall in late summer, the first winter of the rest of our lives. Ars Poetica. We all must have one of these or several of these. This is mine. Ars Poetica. Let's not romanticize bodies falling. Others may use float or dance. I refuse to pretend. They were not graceful, quiet. They fell unbelievably fast, straight down, head first. Some screamed the sound they made landing. Forget, thud, louder than the wind. So I'm going to read just a few more poems. The first two are from the last section of the book, which is titled The Present, and it takes me here, brings me to California and my life here. The first one is a poem that Phil heard me read the last time I read in his series, and he kindly published it in Askew. Since then, what I wrote about then has become even more our present situation, so I thought I would read it again. It's called Urban Encounter in Time of Drought. A black snake about 2 feet long, slender as a pencil, suns itself on a quiet side street. It doesn't budge as I approach. Is it dead? The merest nudge with a stick, it sidewinds into the shrubbery. Terrified as I have been of snakes ever since our brownie troop visited the herpetologist, who released her specimens and let them crawl freely around the room. I am sorry to chase this one away. After all, how often does one see a snake in Hollywood? It hardly rained all winter. Water restrictions in effect. Rationing is next. Wild animals come down from the tinder-dry hills. As long as we can, we'll water the yard, run the fountain, and fill the bird bath. Let the animals come, even the snakes. And the second poem from this section, the next to last poem, resonates with what we've been going through the last 2 years or year and a half in surprising ways, even though it was written earlier. The title is After a Sleepless Night, I Cook. Does everyone here know what a shrike is? It's a predatory bird of the desert. Okay. After a sleepless night, I cook. The day we saw the shrike, we play Shanghai until midnight, when bleary-eyed from trying to match tiles to make the pyramid collapse and the green dragon breathe a red fire on your computer screen. We turn in and still I can't sleep for thorns on which mice are impaled and wrens crying as they dry in the sun. Then the owl starts to squawk from his favorite dead branch above the parking lot. An ambulance barrels down Barham, the pattern of its high-pitched siren signaling which life-saving equipment will be needed. Setting off the coyotes, triggering in turn another damn owl who contributes his hoots to the chorus, I want to scream. When the racket reaches its peak, the soft gurgle of your breathing breaks into a snore. Dawn bleeds through the drapes before I nod off. That night, I try Joe Montana's recipe for veal piccata, buried inside the Inquirer bought because little Joe was dying. To serve two, take 3 heaping tablespoons of capers and a whole lemon, peeled and chopped. Pulling back pith with a paring knife, the juice stings the slits in my dry fingers, but married to the briny buds, picked by hand from the shrub with spines and reduced, the sour lost its bite and was good. And the last poem I'm going to read is titled To the Dust. I think you probably all know what I mean by now by the dust. To the dust, in our eyes, in the corner of a pocket, under a bed, on top of books, behind them, along a windowsill, trapped by screens, glass, suspended in the air. It sticks to needles and leaves, to branches, bark, shrubs, mulch, to soil. On puddles, it floats, in gutters, down streams to rivers, flowing into the ocean until currents, slowing, can carry the load no longer. It drifts to the bottom of the sea, waits as mud. Sediments compress, solidify, a record in stone, a world as once it was. Thank you.